Is someone playing violin in a machine shop? Clara Duval stopped mid-step, her voice low-sharp, almost accusatory as it cut through the sterile air of the corridor. No one answered, only the distant hum of overhead lights and the rhythmic hiss of hydraulic lines from the factory floor below. But the music persisted. Faint at first, like a whisper lost in the clang of metal, then rising, aching, deliberate, heartbreakingly human. It didn't belong here. Not among steel and circuits. Not in a facility that built systems designed for war. She turned toward the sound, instinctively heels clicking across the concrete with a precision that mirrored her every habit. Clara didn't detour. She didn't veer off course. But the violin, it unraveled something inside her, something ancient and unfinished. She passed rows of silent machines and workstations tucked neatly beneath overhanging pipes. Everything around her smelled like oil and heated metal. And still the violin sang. Debussy, Clair de Lune. Clara halted at the edge of a wide maintenance bay. She ducked behind a column, not out of fear, but reverence, like she was intruding on a sacred space. The music floated from the far side of the room where a single workbench had been cleared. And there he was. A man in a gray maintenance uniform back turned to her head, bowed slightly, drawing a bow across an old violin with worn grace. His shoulders were strong but soft in posture, relaxed in a way no one ever was in her boardrooms. And beside him on a low wooden stool sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 9. Barefoot, her socks mismatched. Her arms rested on her knees as she colored quietly with stubby crayons, utterly undisturbed by the haunting elegance of the music around her. No phone, no screen, just her and the sound. Clara stared, not just because it was beautiful, but because it didn't make sense. No one had told her there was a musician on staff, and certainly not in the maintenance division. The man's hands were calloused, clearly used to wrenches and steel bolts, not fine instruments. And yet the way he played, he didn't just know the music. He felt it. Every note held something deeper, as though it had been kept alive not through sheet music, but necessity. Clara took a slow breath, then reached for her tablet to check his badge ID from a distance. But she stopped herself. She didn't want data right now. She wanted to feel this, whatever this was. The last note lingered like the final whisper of a dream. The man let the bow fall gently to his side and smiled first at the violin, then at the girl. "That's your favorite, isn't it?" he asked her. The girl didn't speak. She nodded once, then handed him a drawing. He looked at it, chuckled quietly, and held it up to the light. A crayon sketch of 2 stick figures, one holding a violin, the other with bright yellow headphones. Above them, a giant sun and musical notes floating like stars. "It's our lunchtime concert poster, huh?" he said. "You're the artist, and I'm the background noise." The girl grinned. Clara smiled despite herself. Then, as if sensing something or someone, the man turned. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Clara saw him stiffen slightly, not out of fear but caution. His smile faded. The air shifted. Clara stepped forward, heels now echoing across the concrete like gavel strikes. "I wasn't aware music was part of the maintenance protocol," she said coolly, voice steady. He blinked once, then nodded respectfully. "It's not," I figured, she replied. "And yet, you're here." "I am." And Clara motioned to the girl who now sat very still, wide-eyed, but calm. "She's my daughter. I pick her up from school during my lunch break. Her classroom's 5 blocks away. I bring her here for an hour. Then she goes back. That's not standard company procedure." "No," he said, placing the violin back into its case. "It's not." There was no apology in his tone, only honesty. Clara tilted her head slightly. "You could be reported for this." He looked her dead in the eyes. "Then I'll take the report." It wasn't defiance. It was conviction. Quiet, unflinching. The kind that didn't shout to be heard but didn't shrink to please either. Clara stepped closer. "You know who I am?" she asked. "Yes, and you're still willing to play symphonies during lunch hour with your child in a restricted area." The man looked at his daughter, who was now watching him, as if her world depended on what he would say next. "I'd rather she hear beauty in the middle of steel than silence in the middle of safety," he replied, "even if it costs me." Clara didn't expect that answer. She didn't expect any of this. Not the music, not the man, and certainly not the memory that now clawed its way from the locked room in her mind. She turned sharply. "I'll pretend I didn't see anything. Just this once." He nodded. "Thank you." But she didn't leave. She stood still, the echo of his words repeating in her mind. Better beauty in steel than silence in safety. Something inside her shifted, but she wasn't ready to name it. Instead, she asked without turning back, "What's your name, Ethan?" "Ethan Hale." She hesitated. "Then I'm Clara." He already knew that. Everyone in the building knew her name. It was engraved on their emails, embossed on their contracts, and whispered in caution. But this time, she wanted him to hear it from her. Human, not CEO. Clara turned finally, her face unreadable. But as she reached the hallway again and disappeared behind the doors, her hands were trembling just slightly. In her chest, something stirred. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was something more dangerous than either. It was curiosity, and the echo of a violin that somehow had found its way past every wall she'd ever built. She didn't intend to come back. Clara Duval didn't make emotional detours. Her schedule was airtight, optimized to the minute. Her calendar didn't allow for curiosity or violin lunches in the machine shop. And yet, 23 hours and 16 minutes after she walked away from that echoing note and that stubborn man with the quiet fire in his eyes, she was back. No driver, no assistant, no boardroom in sight, just Clara alone in her charcoal slacks, a simple blouse instead of her usual blazer, walking toward the factory gates like someone who had lost something and wasn't yet sure what it was. She stopped just outside the tinted hallway windows that overlooked the maintenance bay. The same spot she had stood yesterday. And there they were again. Ethan Hale and his daughter. Mia sat cross-legged on the floor beside a small box of crayons, her head tilted slightly as she scribbled over thick sketch paper. Her tongue peeked out from the side of her mouth in deep focus. Her headphones, bright yellow with a unicorn sticker peeling off the side, were looped around her neck instead of on her ears. Ethan stood by his workbench, violin in hand, tightening the bow with the precision of a man who knew every creak of the wood. Then, without ceremony, he lifted the instrument and began to play. No warm-up, no hesitation, just sound. Raw, honest, achingly present. This time, it wasn't Debussy. It was something older, slower. A folk melody Clara couldn't place but felt like she had known in a dream, once soft-winding, full of the kind of sorrow that doesn't ask for pity. Clara found herself sitting down on the bench in the hallway, just to listen. She didn't realize how tightly she had been holding her breath until the bow lifted and silence returned. Inside, Ethan gently set the violin down and knelt beside Mia. She showed him her drawing. He nodded with approval, then said something Clara couldn't hear, something that made the little girl smile and tuck the paper into her backpack with exaggerated care. That smile hit Clara like a wave. A small, simple moment. But it stayed with her. She rose and, without fully knowing why, walked into the bay. Ethan looked up as the heavy door creaked open. His expression was neutral, but not unkind. Mia looked too, but didn't react. She simply returned to her drawing. "I didn't expect to see you again," Ethan said, straightening. Clara answered without thinking. "Neither did I." They stood there, unspeaking, the air full of invisible things. "I wasn't sure if you were going to file a complaint," he added. "I still might," Clara said. A pause. Then she smiled faintly. "I didn't come here as a CEO today." "Then what did you come as? I don't know yet," she admitted. That seemed to land. Ethan nodded once and motioned to the workbench stool beside his. "You can sit, if you want." Clara hesitated, then crossed the floor and sat legs